I'm Vanessa, 26 years old, when I left for London on a career-defining assignment, trusting my parents to safeguard my most precious possession, a 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500, the car I'd spent years saving for in honor of my late Uncle Tom. 4 weeks later, I came home to find it gone, sold behind my back to cover my brother's gambling debts. In that moment, I realized my family valued his mistakes more than my dreams. And that was the day I vowed to stay silent no longer. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and thanks for being here. My obsession with cars started when I was 8 years old. Every Saturday morning, my Uncle Tom would pick me up in his beat-up Ford pickup and drive me to his garage on the outskirts of Portland. While other kids were glued to Saturday morning cartoons, I was learning the difference between a carburetor and a fuel injector. Uncle Tom was my dad's younger brother, a former Marine who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home and opening his own restoration shop. He was the kind of man who could rebuild an engine blindfolded and had more grease under his fingernails than most people have dirt. But to me, he was magic. "Cars aren't just metal, kiddo," he'd say, his weathered hands guiding mine as we changed spark plugs. "They're dreams with engines. Every classic car has a story, and every story matters." His garage was filled with automotive treasures in various states of resurrection. A 1969 Camaro, with its hood up like a patient waiting for surgery. A 1965 Corvette that gleamed candy apple red under the fluorescent lights. But the car that captured my heart completely was tucked in the back corner under a canvas tarp. The day Uncle Tom pulled that tarp away for the first time, I swear my 8-year-old heart stopped beating. It was a 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500, Highland green with racing stripes that seemed to glow even in the dim garage light. The 427 engine sat under the hood like a sleeping giant, and when Uncle Tom fired it up, the sound was pure thunder. "This one's special," he said, running his hand along the fender with the reverence most people reserve for prayer. "One day when you're old enough, maybe you'll find one just like her." "Someday," I whispered to myself, staring at that beautiful machine. "I'm going to own one exactly like this." It was a promise I made to myself that day, one that would shape every major decision I made for the next 18 years. Uncle Tom died in a motorcycle accident when I was 16. The funeral was the first time I'd ever seen my father cry. But even through my grief, I held on to that promise. Every time life got hard, every time I felt like giving up, I'd picture that Highland green Mustang and remember Uncle Tom's words about dreams with engines. My family never understood my passion. My parents, Richard and Linda Mitchell, were practical people. Dad worked in insurance, Mom was a nurse, and they believed in practical things. My fascination with engines and horsepower was seen as an unfortunate phase I'd eventually outgrow. "Why can't you be interested in normal girl things?" Mom would sigh whenever I came home with grease stains on my clothes. "What about dance classes or art?" But their reaction to my interests was nothing compared to how they treated my younger brother Kevin. Where I was expected to be independent and self-sufficient, Kevin was coddled and protected from every consequence of his actions. Kevin is 2 years younger than me, and from the day he was born, it was like the sun rose and set on his existence. When he crashed Dad's car at 19 because he was texting while driving, Dad's response was to buy him another one because he needs reliable transportation for job interviews. When I asked for help with college expenses at 17, I was told that financial independence would build character. When Kevin dropped out of art school after 1 semester because it was too hard, my parents called it finding his path. When I graduated summa cum laude with a computer science degree, the family dinner conversation focused on Kevin's new idea to become a YouTube gaming influencer. By the time I landed my first job as a software engineer at a Seattle startup, Kevin had moved back into my parents' basement for the 3rd time. He was 24, unemployed, and spending his days playing video games while my parents funded his creative endeavors. "He's just going through a rough patch," Mom would say whenever I pointed out the obvious disparity. "He's sensitive. Not everyone can be as strong as you, Vanessa." As if being strong was something I'd chosen rather than something I'd been forced to become. But I had a goal, and family dysfunction wasn't going to derail me. For 3 years after college, I lived like a monk. I shared a cramped apartment with 2 roommates in Seattle's University District. I bought clothes from thrift stores and ate ramen noodles for dinner, more nights than I care to admit. Every spare dollar went into a savings account labeled Uncle Tom's Promise. My coworkers went out for drinks after work. I went home and researched classic Mustangs online. They took weekend trips to Vancouver or Portland. I worked overtime and added every extra penny to my car fund. They went on dates. I stayed home and read restoration forms until my eyes burned. $75,000. That was my target. Enough to buy a pristine 1967 Shelby GT500 and have money left over for maintenance and insurance. It took me 3 years of 60-hour work weeks and a lifestyle that would make a Puritan proud, but I finally hit my goal. Finding the right car took another 18 months. I learned quickly that the classic car world is full of scammers, dreamers, and people who think a rusted-out shell with a clean title is worth $40,000. I traveled to car shows across the Pacific Northwest, joined online forums, and built relationships with dealers and collectors. I almost bought a fake twice, replicas built to look like real Shelbys, but worth a fraction of the price. I almost got scammed by a seller in California who tried to pass off a regular Mustang with fake Shelby badges. But Uncle Tom had taught me well, and I knew what to look for. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. A collector in Sacramento was liquidating part of his collection, and he had a 1967 GT500 that matched my specifications exactly. Highland green, matching numbers, documented history, and pristine condition. "I'm only selling because my wife says I have too many cars," he told me over the phone. "This one deserves someone who'll appreciate her." I drove down to California that weekend, cashier's check burning a hole in my purse. When he pulled the car out of climate-controlled storage, it was like seeing Uncle Tom's Mustang again for the first time. Highland green paint that looked like liquid glass, chrome that gleamed like jewelry, and when he started the engine, that same thunderous rumble that had captured my heart 18 years earlier. "Sold," I said, before he'd even finished telling me about the car's history. The drive home to Seattle was the most emotional 8 hours of my life. Every mile felt like a conversation with Uncle Tom. Every gear shift was a celebration of 3 years of sacrifice. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex parking garage, I sat in the driver's seat and cried. "Uncle Tom," I whispered, running my hands over the steering wheel, "your little grease monkey finally got her dream." For 2 years, that car was my pride and joy. I joined the Pacific Northwest Mustang Club and made friends who understood why someone would spend their entire savings on a car. I learned to do my own maintenance, spending weekends in the garage with the same peaceful focus Uncle Tom had taught me. I documented every mile, every oil change, every car show in a leather-bound journal. And then the opportunity of a lifetime knocked on my door. "Vanessa, I need to see you in my office." My boss Jennifer's voice was unreadable when she called me that Friday afternoon. As the senior software engineer for a mid-sized tech company, I was used to crisis meetings. But something about her tone made my stomach clench. I walked down the hallway to her corner office, mentally reviewing every project I was working on, looking for potential disasters. "How's your passport situation?" she asked without preamble as I sat down. I blinked. "Current." "Why?" "We just finalized the merger with TechFlow London. They want someone to lead the integration team for their new platform, and you're the obvious choice. It's a 4-week assignment, but if it goes well, they're offering a permanent position. £85,000 per year, plus relocation assistance." My brain stuttered. TechFlow was a major player in the European market. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a complete career transformation. "When would I leave?" I managed to ask. "Monday. 4 days to prepare for a month in London, with the possibility of relocating permanently." It was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been working toward, but my mind immediately went to my Mustang. Seattle had been experiencing a rash of car break-ins lately, and my apartment's parking garage wasn't exactly Fort Knox. The thought of leaving my baby unattended for a month made my palms sweat. I considered my options. My best friend Jake's garage was full, and commercial storage felt too impersonal for something so precious. Finally, I decided on my parents' house in Portland. They had a spacious garage in a quiet neighborhood with low crime rates, and despite our complicated relationship, I trusted them to at least keep my car safe. I called Dad that evening. Of course we'd be honored to watch over your baby, he said immediately. We've got plenty of room since Kevin moved into his new apartment. Mom was less enthusiastic but agreeable. I suppose we have space, she said. How long did you say you'd be gone? 4 weeks, possibly longer if they offer me the permanent position. The Saturday before my Monday departure, I drove down to Portland to drop off the Mustang. Dad was waiting in the driveway when I pulled up, and his face lit up when he saw the car. She's still a beauty, he said, running his hand along the hood. Uncle Tom would be so proud. I spent 20 minutes giving him detailed instructions. Start her once a week and let her run for 15 minutes. Use this specific car cover, and please, whatever you do, don't let anyone else drive her. The insurance situation is complicated. Vanessa, I know how to take care of a car, Dad said, slightly offended. I'll treat her like she's made of gold. I know, Dad. I just worry. This car means everything to me. Kevin appeared from the house as we were moving the Mustang into the garage. He'd actually been staying at the house more often lately, despite supposedly having his own place. Don't worry, sis, he said, with that lazy grin that had charmed his way out of consequences his entire life. I'll keep her company while you're gone. Something about his tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was family. They might drive me crazy, but they wouldn't betray my trust. At least that's what I told myself. Monday morning, Jake drove me to the airport. As we pulled away from my apartment complex, I looked back at the empty parking space where my Mustang usually sat, and felt a pang of separation anxiety. She'll be fine, Jake said, squeezing my hand. Your parents understand how much that car means to you. I know, I'm just being paranoid. The flight to London was long, but I spent most of it researching the TechFlow platform and planning my integration strategy. This was my chance to prove myself on an international level, and I wasn't going to waste it. The first 3 weeks in London exceeded every expectation. The TechFlow team was brilliant, the project was fascinating, and my integration plan was working flawlessly. By week 3, the company had officially offered me the permanent position with an even better compensation package than originally discussed. I called home regularly, checking in with my parents and getting updates on the car. Everything seemed fine. Dad assured me the Mustang was running perfectly. Mom complained about the Seattle weather she'd seen on the news, and life moved forward normally. But looking back now, I should have paid more attention to the details. Like Kevin appearing in the background of our video calls wearing clothes I'd never seen before. Like Dad's slight hesitation when I asked about the car's weekly startup routine. Like Mom's increasingly vague responses when I asked how Kevin was doing with his new opportunities. The red flags were there, I just chose not to see them. During my final week in London, the calls home became stranger. Mom kept mentioning exciting news they'd share when I got home. Dad seemed nervous and kept steering conversations away from anything car-related. And Kevin posted a series of Instagram stories that showed him at expensive restaurants and gaming stores, buying equipment that should have been way outside his budget. But I was distracted by my own success. The London project had gone so well that TechFlow was fast-tracking my visa application. I'd found a flat in Camden I could afford, and Jake was supportive of our long-distance relationship plan. I was living in a bubble of professional triumph and future possibilities. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have called more often, asked harder questions, demanded video proof that my car was safe. But I was 26 years old, riding high on career success, and I trusted my family. That trust was about to cost me everything. My flight landed at PDX at 2:30 on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in November. I was exhausted from the red-eye, but energized by the thought of seeing my Mustang again and sharing my incredible news with my family. The plan was simple: pick up my car, drive it home to Seattle, and spend the evening planning my transition to London. I caught an Uber directly to my parents' house, watching familiar Portland neighborhoods blur past the rain-streaked windows. Despite the long flight, I felt good. 4 weeks in London had been professionally transformative, and I was returning home with options and opportunities I'd never dreamed possible. The Uber pulled into my parents' driveway, and I immediately noticed something was wrong. The garage door was partially open, revealing Dad's Camry and Mom's SUV, but there was no third car. No Highland green Mustang gleaming under the garage lights. Maybe they moved it to the back, I muttered to myself, paying the driver and wheeling my suitcase toward the front door. Mom opened the door before I could knock, her smile too bright and her eyes avoiding mine. "Vanessa, welcome home, sweetheart. How was your flight?" "Fine," I said, distracted. "Mom, where's my car?" A flicker of something crossed her face. Defensiveness mixed with what I would later recognize as guilt. She ushered me inside without answering. "Your father's in the living room. We have so much to catch up on." Dad was sitting in his recliner, newspaper open but clearly not reading. He looked up when I entered, and his smile was as forced as Mom's. "Where's my Mustang?" I asked directly, my suitcase still in my hand. Dad cleared his throat and glanced at Mom, who was suddenly very busy, arranging cookies on a plate, as if this were a normal homecoming visit. "Well, honey," Dad began, his voice unnaturally high. "Something came up while you were gone." The knot in my stomach tightened. "What do you mean? Where is my car?" Mom turned then, lifting her chin in that way she always did when she was about to defend something indefensible. "Kevin needed some help," she said firmly. "A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity came up." I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what she was saying. "What does that have to do with my car?" Mom's smile became something closer to a sneer. "Thanks to your car, our son finally has his life together." She pulled out her phone and showed me Kevin's Instagram feed. There he was, standing in front of what looked like a luxury apartment building, keys in his hand and a huge grin on his face. Another photo showed him at a gaming convention in Las Vegas, surrounded by expensive equipment. A third showed him at a casino table, chips stacked in front of him. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. "You sold my car," I whispered, the words barely audible even to myself. "Now, Vanessa," Dad began in his placating tone, "you need to understand. Kevin was in serious trouble. He owed some very dangerous people a lot of money." "So you sold my car?" This time I did shout, my voice echoing off the living room walls. "You can always buy another car," Mom said dismissively. "You make good money. Kevin could have been seriously hurt." I felt like I was falling through space. My hands began to shake as the full impact hit me. That car was registered in my name. You had no legal right to sell it. My parents exchanged a glance that confirmed my worst fears. "Well, technically," Dad mumbled. "We told the buyer you were selling it and had authorized us to handle the transaction." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. The room seemed to spin slightly as I tried to process what they had done. "Do you have any idea what that car meant to me?" My voice cracked. It wasn't just transportation. It was Uncle Tom. It was 3 years of my life. It was my connection to the only person in this family who ever believed in me. "It's just a car, Vanessa," Mom said, her tone hardening. "Family is what matters. Kevin is your brother. And I'm your daughter," I screamed. "Or do I not count? Do my feelings, my property, my boundaries just not matter at all?" "Don't be so dramatic," Mom scoffed. "You've always been so materialistic, so focused on things." Kevin was struggling with depression and gambling addiction. The car money got him the help he needed. "Depression?" I echoed incredulously. "Since when? And if he had a gambling problem, why did you give him money? That's like giving a bottle to an alcoholic." "You don't understand," Dad said weakly. "These people he owed money to. They were threatening him. They were going to hurt him." I laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "Welcome to the real world, Dad. Actions have consequences. Or at least they do for some people in this family." "How much did you sell it for?" I demanded. More uncomfortable glances between my parents. Finally, Dad answered in a voice barely above a whisper. 45,000, I gasped. 45,000? That car was worth 75,000. "Did you do any research at all?" "The buyer said it was a fair price," Dad muttered. "We needed to move quickly." That statement, so naked in its betrayal, hit me like a physical blow. They had deliberately rushed the sale, knowing I would try to stop them if I found out. "Who did you sell it to?" "Some dealer in Tacoma," Mom said vaguely. "I don't remember his name." My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Just landed. Can't wait to see you in the Mustang." And that's when Kevin walked in. "Hey sis, welcome home." He was wearing designer clothes I'd never seen before and carrying shopping bags from high-end electronics stores. "How was London?" I turned to look at him, this brother I'd grown up with, this person who'd been protected and coddled his entire life, while I'd been expected to be strong and independent. And something inside me snapped. "You piece of shit," I said quietly. Kevin's smile faltered. Vanessa, I know you're upset, but you stole my car, I continued, my voice rising. You manipulated our parents into selling the one thing that mattered most to me, so you could pay off gambling debts and buy yourself a new life. It wasn't like that, Kevin said, but he was backing toward the door. I was in real trouble, Vanessa. These guys were serious. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you started gambling with money you didn't have. Vanessa, please, Mom interjected, reaching out to touch my arm. You need to understand. Don't touch me, I slapped her hand away. The sound sharp in the suddenly quiet room. Kevin stepped forward. Hey, don't talk to Mom like that. Look, I know you're mad, but I can pay you back. I've got some investments. I shoved him, hard. Kevin stumbled backward, his shopping bag scattering, and hit the wall with enough force to knock a family photo to the floor. You pathetic piece of shit, I screamed. You're 24 years old and you've never worked for anything in your entire life. And now you've destroyed the one thing that connected me to Uncle Tom because you're too weak and stupid to face the consequences of your own actions. That's enough, Dad shouted, stepping between Kevin and me. Vanessa, I know you're upset, but violence isn't the answer. I stared at him, this man who'd raised me to be responsible and independent, while simultaneously teaching my brother that his mistakes would always be cleaned up by someone else. You're right, Dad. Violence isn't the answer, but neither is enabling a 24-year-old child to destroy other people's lives. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. Where are you going? Mom called after me. Anywhere but here, I said, without looking back. You've made your choice about which child matters. Now live with it. I slammed the door behind me and called another Uber, standing in the rain while my family watched from the window. The next hour was a blur of phone calls and growing rage. First, I called Jake and told him what had happened. His reaction was immediate and furious. They did what? Vanessa, that's theft. That's fraud. You need to call the police. They're my parents, I said. Though even as I said it, the words felt hollow. So what? If I stole your car, would you hesitate to press charges? He was right, of course. But the thought of sending my parents to prison made me physically sick. Next, I called a lawyer friend from college who specialized in criminal law. Her assessment was blunt and terrifying. What they did constitutes grand theft, auto, fraud, and forgery, she said. The fact that you're related doesn't change the legal reality. They could be looking at serious prison time. What are my options? Press charges and let the legal system handle it. Pursue civil remedies or try to resolve it privately. But Vanessa, the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to recover the car or the money. I spent that night in a hotel room, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to call the police immediately and watch my parents get arrested. Part of me still couldn't believe this was really happening, but as I lay there in the dark, a plan began to form. A plan that would make them understand exactly what they had cost me, and exactly what it felt like to have your entire world turned upside down by people who claimed to love you. The next morning, I started making calls. The car dealer in Tacoma was surprisingly helpful once I explained the situation. Yes, he'd bought the car from my parents. No, he didn't have it anymore. He'd already sold it to a private collector in Vancouver. But he still had all the paperwork, including the forged documents my parents had created. I'm sorry to hear about this, he said. Family situations are always complicated. But if this was done without your knowledge, you might want to talk to a lawyer. Already on it, I said. Next, I contacted the collector in Vancouver. He was understandably upset to learn he'd unknowingly purchased a stolen car, but he was willing to work with me to resolve the situation. I paid 55,000 Canadian for it, he said. If you can prove ownership and reimburse me, I'll gladly return the car. 55,000 Canadian dollars was about 42,000 US. So my parents had sold my $75,000 car for 45,000. The dealer had marked it up and sold it for 55,000 Canadian. And I was going to have to pay 42,000 to get it back. The math was making me homicidal. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the paperwork my lawyer obtained from the dealer. My parents hadn't just forged my signature. They'd created an entire fictional story about why I was selling the car. According to their documents, I was moving to Europe permanently and couldn't take the car with me, which, ironically, was exactly what I was now planning to do. Over the next week, I put my plan into motion. First, I posted a detailed account of what had happened on social media. I tagged extended family members, family friends, and anyone who knew my parents. The response was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive. Uncle Tom's veteran friends were particularly outraged. My Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, called me crying. "I can't believe Linda would do this," she said. "That car was your connection to Tom. She knows how much it meant to you." The social media post went viral within our extended network. By the end of the week, everyone my parents knew was aware of what they'd done. The comments ranged from supportive, "You have every right to be furious," to shocked, "I never would have expected this from Richard and Linda." My parents tried damage control, posting their own version of events that painted me as selfish and ungrateful. It backfired spectacularly. Even their friends were commenting things like, "But it wasn't your car to sell," and Vanessa worked 3 years to buy that car. Meanwhile, my lawyer sent them a formal demand letter requiring full restitution within 30 days, or we would pursue criminal charges. The amount, $75,000 for the car's value, plus $15,000 in damages for the time, effort, and emotional distress of having to recover it. $90,000 total. My parents panicked. Dad called me dozens of times, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Mom showed up at my apartment building, crying in the lobby until security escorted her out. Kevin tried to reach me through mutual friends, offering to work something out. I ignored them all. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I was at work when my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Is this Vanessa Mitchell?" "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Detective Rodriguez with Portland PD. We've received a complaint about some missing property, and your name came up as a possible victim. Do you have time to come in and file a report?" I smiled for the first time since coming home from London. Someone, probably one of Uncle Tom's veteran friends, had called the police. "I'll be right there." 3 hours later, I was sitting in a police station filling out paperwork for grand theft auto charges against my own parents. Detective Rodriguez was sympathetic but thorough. "Family situations are always tough," he said. "But the law is the law. If they sold your car without permission and forged your signature, that's a felony regardless of their motivation. What happens next? We'll issue arrest warrants within 48 hours. Given the amount involved and the forgery, they're looking at potential prison time." I left the police station feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Justice was finally coming, but my parents weren't going down without a fight. That evening, my phone exploded with calls and texts from family members begging me to reconsider. My grandmother, Dad's mother, called crying. "Vanessa, honey, please don't do this. They're good people who made a mistake. Prison would destroy them." "They destroyed something that meant everything to me, Grandma. Actions have consequences." "But they're family, so am I said quietly. But they didn't remember that when it mattered. The next morning, Kevin showed up at my office. Security called up to ask if I wanted to see him, and curiosity got the better of me. He looked terrible. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he'd clearly lost weight. "Vanessa, please," he said before I could speak. "You have to drop the charges. Mom's having panic attacks. Dad hasn't slept in 3 days. They're going to lose the house if they have to pay legal fees on top of the restitution." "Good," I said simply. "That's our childhood home. And the Mustang was my connection to Uncle Tom. But you didn't care about that when you needed gambling money." Kevin's face crumpled. "I was desperate, Vanessa. These guys were serious. They were going to break my legs, maybe worse." "Then maybe you should have learned to live with broken legs instead of stealing from your sister." "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, tears starting to flow. "I thought you'd be angry, but I thought you'd understand eventually. I thought family meant something to you." I leaned back in my chair and studied this pathetic man who shared my DNA. "Family did mean something to me, Kevin, but you and our parents taught me that I was wrong about what family means. Family isn't supposed to protect you from every consequence. Family isn't supposed to steal from each other. And family sure as hell isn't supposed to choose one child's irresponsibility over another child's dreams." "I'll do anything," he whispered. "I'll get a job, a real job. I'll pay you back every penny. With what money? You've never held a job for more than 6 months in your entire life." "I'll figure it out. Please, Vanessa, don't destroy our family over a car. I stood up. I didn't destroy our family, Kevin. You did. Now get out of my office before I call security. The arrest warrants were issued on a Friday. I wasn't there to see it, but according to my Aunt Carol, who lived next door to my parents, it was a scene straight out of a TV drama. 2 patrol cars, handcuffs, and neighbors watching from their windows as Richard and Linda Mitchell were led away in the back of police cars. Kevin was arrested at his apartment an hour later. They were released on bail the same day, but the damage was done. The entire neighborhood knew what had happened. Dad's insurance company launched an internal investigation into whether he'd committed fraud in other areas. Mom's hospital received calls from patients who'd seen the news coverage. Their lawyer called me that weekend. Ms. Mitchell, I represent your parents and brother. My clients would like to discuss a settlement that would resolve this matter without going to trial. I'm listening. They're prepared to offer full restitution plus damages. $90,000, as requested in your demand letter. In exchange, you would agree to drop all criminal charges. I pretended to consider it. I'll need to think about it. How long? I'll let you know Monday. That weekend, I flew to Vancouver and personally retrieved my Mustang from the collector. Seeing her again was emotional. She was exactly as I'd left her. Highland green paint gleaming, engine purring like a satisfied cat. But something had changed. The joy I'd once felt driving her was tainted now by the betrayal of how she'd been taken from me. I drove her back to Seattle slowly, taking the scenic route along the coast. By the time I reached my apartment, I'd made my decision. Monday morning, I called the lawyer back. I'll accept the settlement, I said, but with additional conditions. What conditions? First, I want a written apology from all 3 of them, admitting what they did was wrong and promising never to contact me again. Second, I want Kevin to pay an additional $10,000 out of his own pocket, money he'll have to earn at a real job. And third, I want it all done through your office. I don't want to see any of them ever again. There was a long pause. I'll discuss it with my clients and get back to you. The final settlement was signed 2 weeks later. My parents took out a home equity loan to cover most of the money. Kevin, faced with the choice between prison and employment, actually got a job at a fast food restaurant and committed to paying his portion over 2 years. The written apologies were everything I'd hoped for. My parents' letter was 3 pages of single-spaced text acknowledging their betrayal, admitting they'd always favored Kevin, and expressing regret for destroying my trust. Kevin's letter was shorter but more personal, admitting his gambling problem and acknowledging that his selfishness had cost him his sister. I read them once and filed them away. Closure felt good, but it didn't heal the fundamental damage that had been done. With the settlement money and my savings, I bought a brand new 2022 Mustang Shelby GT500. It was faster, more powerful, and more advanced than Uncle Tom's car had ever been. But it wasn't the same. This car was about moving forward, not holding on to the past. I accepted the permanent position in London and began making arrangements to relocate. Jake and I decided to try the long-distance relationship, with plans for him to join me in London once his own career situation stabilized. The last piece of business was deciding what to do with my original Mustang. I could have kept it, but every time I looked at it, I thought about my parents' betrayal. It had been tainted by their actions in a way that couldn't be undone. Instead, I decided to honor Uncle Tom's memory differently. I sold the car to a young woman in Portland, who'd been saving for years to buy her first classic Mustang. She reminded me of myself at her age, passionate, determined, and working multiple jobs to afford her dream. Uncle Tom would have approved, I said as I handed her the keys. Take care of her. My flight to London was scheduled for a Friday in March, exactly 1 year after my parents had sold my car. I'd said goodbye to my friends, packed my belongings, and tied up all loose ends in Seattle. The only family member who came to see me off was my Aunt Carol. I'm proud of you, she said, hugging me at the airport. You stood up for yourself when it mattered. Tom would be proud too. Thank you for believing me, I said. It meant more than you know. Your parents ask about you sometimes, she said carefully. They miss you. They made their choice, I replied. I'm making mine. As my plane lifted off from Seattle, I looked down at the city I was leaving behind and felt a complex mixture of sadness and relief. I was walking away from my family, my childhood home, and the life I'd built for myself. but I was also walking away from a dynamic that had never served me well, toward opportunities and experiences I'd never dreamed possible. London welcomed me with rain and opportunity. My new job exceeded every expectation. My flat in Camden was perfect, and I quickly built a social circle of colleagues and friends who appreciated my passion for both technology and classic cars. The British car culture was different but equally enthusiastic, and I found myself joining weekend drives through the Cotswolds with a group of vintage Mustang owners who'd imported their cars from America. 3 months into my London life, I got an unexpected call from Detective Rodriguez in Portland. "Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to update you on your family's case. Your brother Kevin has been arrested again." My stomach dropped. "What for?" "Assault and battery. Apparently, he got into a fight at work and punched his supervisor. The victim is pressing charges, and given that Kevin was already on probation from the car theft case, he's looking at serious jail time." I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. Kevin's pattern of avoiding consequences had finally caught up with him, but part of me felt sad for the little brother I'd once tried to protect from schoolyard bullies. What about my parents? They're fine, legally speaking, but from what I hear around town, they're not doing well. Your father lost his job. Apparently, the insurance company didn't like the criminal conviction. Your mother's working double shifts to keep up with the mortgage payments on their house. After hanging up, I sat in my London flat staring out at the gray afternoon sky. I'd gotten everything I'd demanded: justice, restitution, and freedom from my toxic family dynamics. So why didn't it feel more satisfying? Jake called that evening, as he did every day at 6 p.m. London time. "You heard about Kevin," he said without preamble. Detective Rodriguez called. "How did you know?" "Your Aunt Carol called my mom. The Portland grapevine is alive and well. How do you feel about it?" he asked gently. I considered the question. Sad, I guess. Not surprised, but sad. He's 25 years old, and he's never learned that actions have consequences. Prison might actually be the best thing that could happen to him. "And your parents?" "I don't know, Jake. I got what I wanted. They lost their house, their reputation, their golden child. But it doesn't feel like victory. It just feels empty." "You could reach out," he suggested carefully. "Not to reconcile, but maybe to find some closure." "Maybe," I said. "But not yet. I'm not ready." 6 months later, I was ready. I'd been promoted to Senior Integration Manager at TechFlow. Jake had accepted a position with a London startup and moved in with me, and I'd found my rhythm in my new life. The anger that had sustained me through the first year was fading, replaced by something calmer but more permanent. I wrote my parents a letter, not warm, not forgiving, but human. "Dear Mom and Dad," it began. "I'm writing this from London, where I've built a life I never could have imagined. I'm successful, happy, and surrounded by people who respect my boundaries and value my contributions. I want you to know that I don't hate you. Hate requires too much energy, and I'd rather spend mine on positive things. But I also want you to understand that what you did changed something fundamental between us. You taught me that my feelings, my possessions, and my dreams were less important than Kevin's immediate needs. That lesson has shaped how I view family, trust, and love. I hope Kevin gets the help he needs in prison. I hope you've learned that protecting someone from consequences isn't actually protecting them at all. And I hope someday you understand that strength isn't something a person chooses. It's something they develop because the alternative is being destroyed. I won't be coming home for holidays or family gatherings. I won't be calling on birthdays or sending Christmas cards. This isn't punishment, it's self-preservation. I've learned to build my family from people who choose to support me, rather than people who share my DNA. Take care of yourselves. Vanessa." I never sent the letter. Writing it was enough. Instead, I focused on building the life I wanted. Jake and I explored Europe on weekends, taking my new Mustang on epic road trips through France, Germany, and Italy. I spoke at tech conferences, mentored young women entering the software engineering field, and slowly built a reputation as someone who could bridge American and European business cultures. 2 years after moving to London, I got a call that changed everything again. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Attorney Williams from Portland. I'm calling about your Uncle Tom's estate." I was confused. Uncle Tom died 8 years ago. His estate was settled long ago. That's what we thought too. But we've discovered some property that was never properly transferred. Apparently, your uncle owned a small garage and auto shop in addition to his personal garage. The property has been tied up in legal complications, but we've finally cleared the title. My heart started racing. What does this have to do with me? According to his will, you're the sole beneficiary of his automotive assets, the property, the tools, and apparently several vintage cars that were stored in a climate-controlled warehouse. We need you to come to Portland to sign the paperwork and decide what you want to do with everything. 3 weeks later, I was back in Portland for the first time since my exile. I stayed in a hotel downtown and rented a car, avoiding any chance of accidentally running into my family. The warehouse attorney Williams led me to was in an industrial district I'd never seen before. When he unlocked the door and turned on the lights, I gasped. There were 6 cars under tarps, plus enough restoration equipment and spare parts to open my own shop. But what made me cry was the note taped to the workbench, written in Uncle Tom's familiar handwriting. Nessie, it said, using the childhood nickname only he had ever called me. If you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're old enough to understand what these cars really are. They're not just machines, they're possibilities. Every one of them can be restored, improved, and loved by someone who appreciates what they represent. I always knew you'd make something special of your life, whether you keep these cars or sell them. Use them to build something that makes you happy. You were always my favorite engineer, even when you were 8 years old and couldn't reach the pedals. The 1967 Fastback in the corner was always meant to be yours. I bought it the year you were born and planned to restore it with you when you got older. Life got in the way, but maybe it's better this way. Now you can make it exactly what you want it to be. Build something beautiful, kiddo. You've got the skills and the heart for it. Love, Uncle Tom. P.S. Your parents never knew about this place. I wanted to make sure you had something that was just yours. I spent 3 hours in that warehouse, crying, laughing, and planning. The 1967 Fastback was a project car, complete but needing everything from paint to engine work. The other cars were in various stages of restoration, each one representing months or years of potential work. By the time I left Portland, I'd made another life-changing decision. I resigned from TechFlow, sold my flat in Camden, and used my savings to ship Uncle Tom's entire collection to a warehouse I rented outside London. Jake thought I'd lost my mind until I explained my vision. I'm going to start a restoration shop, I told him. Classic American muscle cars for the European market. There's a huge demand here, and almost no one doing high-quality work. You're going to give up your tech career to become a mechanic. I'm going to give up working for other people to build something that honors Uncle Tom's memory and uses everything he taught me. Mitchell Classic Restoration opened 6 months later in a converted aircraft hangar in Kent. My first customer was a London banker who'd always dreamed of owning a 1969 Camaro. My second was a tech entrepreneur who wanted me to build him a modern resto-mod Mustang with contemporary performance and classic styling. Word spread quickly through London's classic car community. Within a year, I had a 6-month waiting list and was employing 3 full-time mechanics. Jake handled the business side while I focused on the technical work, and we discovered that our partnership was even stronger in business than it had been in romance. 3 years after opening, I was featured on the cover of Classic Car Quarterly as the American woman revolutionizing British restoration. The article included photos of Uncle Tom's original garage and told the story of how his mentorship had shaped my career path. That article apparently made its way back to Portland because I got a letter from my Aunt Carol. Vanessa, she wrote, I saw the magazine article and I'm so proud of what you've built. Tom would be over the moon. I wanted you to know that your parents saw it too. Your mother cried when she read it, and your father said, she did it. She really did it. I'm not asking you to forgive them or to come home. I know too much has happened for that. But I thought you should know that they finally understand what they cost you. And they're proud of what you've become, despite their mistakes. Kevin is doing better, by the way. Prison was hard on him, but he's been clean and sober for 2 years now. He's working construction and living in a halfway house, taking responsibility for his life for the first time ever. He asks about you sometimes, but he understands why you can't have him in your life. Take care of yourself, sweetheart. You've built something beautiful. I kept that letter, but I didn't respond. Some wounds heal, but some relationships can't be rebuilt. I'd learned to be at peace with both realities. 5 years after leaving Portland, Jake and I got married in a small ceremony at our workshop, surrounded by the cars we'd restored together and the friends we'd made in the British classic car community. Uncle Tom's 1967 Fastback, now fully restored in Highland green with racing stripes, served as our wedding car. As we drove away from our reception, Jake in the passenger seat and the sound of the 427 engine rumbling beneath us, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. My parents' betrayal had been devastating, but it had also freed me from relationships that were built on inequality and manipulation. I'd learned that family isn't just about shared DNA. It's about mutual respect, support, and love that doesn't come with conditions. Jake was my family now. My employees and customers who appreciated my work were my family. The classic car community that welcomed me with open arms was my family. And Uncle Tom, who'd believed in me from the beginning and left me the tools to build my own dreams, would always be my family. The last thing I want to say to anyone watching this is simple. Don't let anyone, not even family, convince you that your dreams don't matter. Don't let anyone steal what you've worked for and tell you it's for the greater good. And don't be afraid to walk away from people who don't value what you bring to their lives. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing alone for a while. And sometimes the greatest betrayal becomes the push you needed to build something even better than what you lost. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, share it in the comments. You're not alone. And if this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button because I'll be sharing more stories about building a life on your own terms. Remember, you are not responsible for protecting other people from the consequences of their actions. You are responsible for protecting yourself from people who would sacrifice your well-being for their convenience. Build something beautiful with your life. You've got the skills and the heart for it.